everyone, I'm Brian Wane. I'm the CEO at XQ Message. In keeping with the Scott Pilgrim versus the world theme, we're going to go with data versus Goliath today. And data is us. Each of our different companies, we have our own little perimeters, our own purviews, but big bad keeps coming, obviously. And a lot of that, as Eric mentioned before, is nation-state attacks. So let's talk about how we take data off the table and reduce that threat vector, especially when the network fails. I'll just start with a couple examples out there. So the state of the state, the email token State Department hack from last month, 60,000 emails exported by, exfiltrated by China, massive breach, and this is the State Department. It's the best security that the government's got, right? They're on GovCloud, they're on GCC High, everything else that they have there. But what happened was they were able to find an aging Microsoft token on an engineer's laptop, take it to another laptop, and exfiltrate all that information. Get a massive breach within like Asia, within the diplomatic communities. They actually they hacked the ambassador to China. Like the meta of that is pretty hilarious. But again, it's this idea that like if you're protecting just the credentials, just the perimeter, what's going to happen? So let's look at one more here. Next slide, please. So start out with one from about 10 years ago, actually. Now this is when Iran attacked Saudi, the Schuman breach, right? Ended up with them encrypting, I think, 30,000 servers in the end, and actually just rewriting them. Took them weeks to come back, like Aramco to come back. So they had a Palo Alto on the end, right? Great, zero trust firewall at the edge. Shouldn't have been able to get in, but also shouldn't have been able to get the data out. So pretended to be a legitimate request from the outside. We're able to get inside. And then how did they get that data out? Well, they cloaked it, right? They cloaked it as Google searches, Google Map searches. So like if you're looking for local restaurants, what about falafel, anything else? It took a long time, but what did they care? It's a bot that's just sitting there running, encrypting these things, like little bits, a bit at a time, and getting it out there. Because when the network security failed at the edge, the data was still vulnerable. Next slide, please. So why do we do what we do? And how do we do it? My partner, Junaid Islam, he's been in the IC for the last 30 years, invented software-defined perimeter back in 2015. Before that, worked on MPLS routing. A lot of code, some of his code, is still on the Patriot launch system, so shooting down missiles, Russian missiles over Ukraine right now. And essentially, he spent the last 30 years thinking, like, how do we protect ourselves from foreign attacks? Whether that's China, whether that's Russia, North Korea, anything else like that. So a lot of thinking about like the different vectors and what they mean. And you know, if you look at it two ways, you know, with the China versus you know, Russia, from it, so we take those two big guys. It's two separate sort of like approaches. China's looking to exfiltrate the data. Russia is looking for a lateral movement to be able to, you know, infect malware, ransomware, the rest of that stuff. So a lot of the thinking that came out of this started there. I've been in tech for 20 years. I used to, it's a frightening statistic, right? I used to have a game company, made a lot of children's games for folks before moving into security about 5 years ago. But the fact of the matter is that security's got to be seamless. It's got to be something we don't think about. It's got to be at the experience level that any 3-year-old. I like to describe us all as digital toddlers. Then we have Kelby Price, again, 10 years in tech, a serial entrepreneur. So there's, you know, 60 years of thinking around how do we solve this problem, and what was the biggest problem that was out there. Whether it was the network security, was it you know, ransomware. at the end of the day, the thing that we need to protect is the data. And then how do we go about doing that? Next slide, please. So data encapsulation. We're talking about microsegmentation at the data level. So taking every single data object, whether that is implemented within an application, whether that's data in flight, whether that's data that's being accessed through an API or at rest, and wrapping it in its own secure capsule. That capsule is then encrypted with a quantum seeded key. We're taking quantum, thank you, entropy. We're generating keys at the edge. We're attaching data access controls, data loss prevention controls to the individual capsule, and then binding those things together. So that protection is not dependent on the environment. If we look at the earlier examples of what we talked about before, whether that is the State Department hack, whether that is the Palo Alto hack, which also, by the way, Cisco zero-day attack on their routers like last month as well, that idea that the security and compliance is tied to the environment right now. And that's a big problem because when the data moves from one environment to the next, it loses security, it loses compliance. And so it's also tied to a single key very often, of single credentials, allowing for insider threats, allowing for credential compromise, hijack tokens, the rest of that. So this approach to micro-segmenting the data and the ability to control that data after it leaves your environment, giving you complete visibility into your data, whether it's within your environment or moving somewhere else, and creating a secure chain of custody for every single data access attempt. So whether that is shared within Outlook, integrated into OneDrive, moving across your VPN, or sitting on your cloud, making sure that every single data access attempt registers the who, the where, and the when. The where is really important. So let's think about that. If you have, does anyone here care about GDPR or CMMC? Good to see. So how do I actually control where that data is accessed? How do we provide data residency and data sovereignty? Well, every data access attempt, we're geolocating, and then because of those data access controls, we're geofencing it. So that French data will stay in France. That Canadian data will only be accessed within Canada. That American data will only be accessed within America. This is key to many of the regulations that are out there. So if we're bringing this back to a per data object basis, it simplifies security, it simplifies your compliance overhead, and gives you a long tail protection across environments. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we've come to market with 3 basic products that solve this problem, right? So we're looking at zero trust data products. It's a layer on software approach. You don't have to replace, use what you already have. We're integrated deeply into Microsoft 365. We're actually the sole partner for Microsoft Business Premium as their partner for CMMC Level 2 on commercial cloud. Let's stay compliant in commercial cloud. Let's bring our regulated data and keep it on AWS, Azure, without having to move to GovCloud, without having to move to GCC High. This is a way to, we're built on the NIST standard, so it fits many different compliance, whether that's PCI, whether that's HIPAA, whether that is CMMC, ITAR. So we have integrations in with Microsoft 365 in terms of Outlook, also works with Gmail, and then Transfer, which is a data product for data in flight, and Vault. Next slide, please. So with email, this is administered through Microsoft 365. It's an add-in, simple to set up. We manage the policies through federated server. This is protection against ransomware, insider threats, and token hijacking. Next slide, please. Zero trust data transfer, VPN replacement. You can think of a VPN as just a bit pipe, right? Where if someone puts in their straw, they're going to suck out all the milkshake. This is a train instead, where each individual car is encrypted separately with a separate key, right? So that I know that all the data that started here can end up there, completely auditable. This is fantastic for API protection. Sit in front of all your APIs that are up there. Data backup and migration. We do that a lot for healthcare. And next slide, please. And then the Zero Trust Vault. The Vault is a virtual file system that can mount any folder, whether that's locally on the endpoint or within the cloud. This gives you complete control over your data, whether it's like within OneDrive, whether it's within Google Drive, or sitting in an Azure blob. Does anyone use Move It? No? You just got hacked again, by the way. Today, there's a second breach, by the way. So this idea of like, how do I keep this on my own infrastructure? I want to put my data on my own Azure, my own AWS, my own GCP, but I want to control the keys. So the ability to use these third-party softwares, but you retain control. You're separating out data access from network access. We integrate in with all the hyperscalers, and we actually partner with them to provide, whether it's CGIS compliance, CMMC, whatnot, the ability to give them that secure chain of custody from the edge to the cloud, and then throughout the entire life cycle, and then of course for egress as well. Next slide, please. So just to bring it back into little case study stories, certainly we help many companies with CMMC, with HIPAA compliance, with their email, their backup to the cloud as well. But there's one thing that we worked on that we're particularly proud of. The State Department, who was actually our first client, came to us, and essentially every communications channel that's out there in terms of chat is hacked at the moment. Signal is deeply hacked. WhatsApp is read in real time by the FBI. A number of other things are Russian-owned. So when you're in environments outside of America especially, and you need to avoid export controls, you're dealing not within like a particular army unit or something else like that. You need to be able to speak with common people in a way that's completely secure. So in South Africa, we helped with anti-human trafficking. Girls were just being taken away enslaved down there. And so basically we created a whistleblower channel for them to be able to do this. And the impact of that is something that is, changed one life, and it's amazing. But this is being obviously used for, maybe not obviously, but within Ukraine for humanitarian aid, Afghanistan for women's education, Mexico to protect journalists and their integrity. So we're incredibly proud of this because each individual object was encrypted separately. There's no possibility for man-in-the-middle attack. And then when you close the browser, that conversation disappears forever. If someone is whistleblowing, they don't have to worry about being reported back or someone snooping in their email and the repercussions up the chain. Next slide, please. So in closing, data versus Goliath. If you're using Zero Trust data, data always wins. If you'd like to discuss any of this stuff or set up a demo for anything, please find Kelby and I at the table today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.